when we are in the presence of God in the new heavens, the new earth, we're going to look around and there's no nations, there's no borders. We are all one new humanity in Christ, and we want to honor that humanity. We want to celebrate that uniqueness that we all bring. And so it's one way for us to do that.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Pastor with Dave Stone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Dave Stone. Thank you for tuning in today and being a part of this. If you don't follow us already on our YouTube channel, all you got to do is go to The Focused Pastor, hit that subscribe button, and that way you'll never miss out on an episode. In fact, wherever you get your podcast, just follow us on there. Feel free to rate the podcast as well. We don't want you to miss an episode. And for those of you who are on Instagram, let me encourage you to follow us there. Our handle is simply Pastor to Pastor Podcast. Well, before we jump into this episode, I want to tell you about a brand new documentary from Focus on the Family and the Colson Center. It's called Truth Rising. Now, Truth Rising will show you stories of ordinary people like you who have made a difference in their communities. So we have the opportunity to become a catalyst for hope and to make a difference. I actually got to see a preview and watch Truth Rising with the board at Focus on the Family last week. And let me tell you, it is riveting and it is convicting. And I promise you that it will inspire your church members to deepen in their faith and in their commitment. So all you got to do is go to truthrising.com in order to learn more. And you can sign up for access to the free premiere that's going to take place on September 5th. So mark your calendar. We'll put the link to truthrising.com in the show notes, but I can't wait for you to see that. Well, today's guest brings up some thoughts that I think we really need to consider. And what he's going to do is he's going to talk about the American church and whether or not we've grown too comfortable or whether or not we're really growing in our commitment. Are we spending too much time on evangelism and not enough time making disciples? Have we lost sight of the most important thing, Jesus Christ, and growing in our relationship with Him? Nirup Alphonse is our guest, and he doesn't pull any punches. Nirup is from southern India, and he now leads a vibrant inter-ethnic church that he planted with his wife, Hannah, in the heart of Denver. The church is called Life Gates, and you're going to enjoy hearing about that. But today, I just want to tip you off ahead of time. You'll probably squirm a little bit. I know I did throughout this interview, as he really causes us to take a look at our own faith and how it is that we are trying to grow churches. So let's listen in on this conversation with Nirup Alphonse. So tell me, take me back. Where were you born? How did you end up in Chicago? How did you end up in Denver?
Yeah,
so my backstory.
My parents are both Indian, born and raised in India in the southern state of Tamil Nadu, which is a big deal. We're Tamils. We're not just Indians. We're Tamil Indians, and that's a big deal for Tamil Indians. So India is a very tribalistic country,
okay.
And so every state almost functions as its own country, as its own language, dance, movies, music, all of that. And so because we're divided by language, it's not like America where you could be born in Ohio and then go to school in Florida and then get your first job in Kansas. It's not like that because language is so different. And so in Tamil Nadu, we speak Tamil. But if you go to the next state over, in Kerala, you'd have to speak Malayalam. If you go to the next state over, you'd have to speak Kannada or Telugu or something else. And so they're Tamils. So it's literally the land of the Tamils. Now, of course, Christianity came to India way before it came to America through St. Thomas, which is, if you ever get an opportunity, you go to a place called St. Thomas Mount. You can actually go to the place. It's a cave where St. Thomas would pray, where he was assassinated by radical Hindus. But you can be in this room where St. Thomas was. And there's this boulder where you can fit your forearms into this boulder. And it's told that he prayed with such fervor that his arms were embedded into the rock. So it's wonderful that the history of Christianity in India is very old. So we grew up there. My parents were Christians there. And then we moved to Singapore. My brother was born in India. He's the older one. And then my parents decided that he wasn't good enough. They wanted to try again. They said, we want someone better. We need something better. And I would say, even though I'm the favorite child, my parents have never put that pressure on me. So it's been great.
Oh,
So I was born.
I have one brother as well, and he's older than me. And he said the same thing. They gave birth to him. They said, we can do better than this.
Exactly.
And then they had me, and then they said, hey, this is getting worse rather than better. We better quit.
Mine was the opposite. They said we could do better again, and then they got my sister.
Okay.
So I was born in Singapore to missionary parents. They went there to start churches and schools and things like that. And so I was born in Singapore. And then when I was 2 years old, my dad had an opportunity to study at Fuller, to get his doctorate at Fuller. And so they moved to Fuller. And so kind of 2 to 4, 5, I was in Pasadena. I don't remember much of Pasadena. My brother remembers more. And then at around 5, 6, we moved back to India. My dad took over a large Methodist church. He became the district superintendent of the Methodist church in India. So we actually grew up in boarding school. So I grew up in a very international life. I grew up in a British boarding school called Kodaikanal International School in a resort town. So this wasn't, the Annie kind of boarding school. This was bougie boarding school. Think Hogwarts, but more British, even more British. But my friends were all international. I had friends that were missionary kids, but then one of my roommates, his dad was one of the bodyguards of Saddam Hussein. So put all that together. That's how I grew up, with teachers from all over the world, with kids from all over the world. So I just grew up a very international life, exposed to the world in so many different ways.
And how long did you stay in India?
So we were there, started first grade, went all the way through middle school, and then moved to the States.
Okay. And there is a difference, you talk about in your states in India, the different languages. I went in 1 year from Kentucky to Illinois, and those are 2 different languages.
Two different languages, yeah.
Two very different languages.
It's English, but they talk different. So, I grew up seeing the Taj Mahal all the time. And most Americans have never seen the Taj Mahal.
No.
And so this past spring, I took a group of people who are on our staff at church to go to India, and I said, well, you have to see the Taj Mahal. And they were so excited to see the Taj Mahal, and I wasn't excited at all. And they're asking me why I'm not excited. And I said, well, I've seen this more times than I can count. And I think there's something to that. I think the more often we see God work, we can often become numb to it. And we no longer believe in the miraculous. We no longer believe in the wonder of how God works anymore, which is why I think in many ways Jesus says we have faith like a child. A child is impressed with what we would find just standard. But my 3-year-old son is so impressed with a bottle of water. This morning, he said, Dad, can I have that bottle of water? And I said, sure, you can take it. And he said, wow. And it's a bottle of water. So I think that's part of the wonder we lose as we get older in the faith. We just lose the impressions that God has on us and seeing the miraculous, and the struggle in Western ideology and the struggle of Western academics and the struggle of Western thought, even in the church, is trying to frame everything in a way that can be understood. And I think there's a difference between understanding and experience. And God is calling us into deep experience, a deep encounter with him. And we're so focused on how do I understand it? How do I understand it? How do I understand it? Rather than just be immersed with God and with the people of God and what God is aiming to do in the world.
And that's so good, Nirup, because of the fact that as you share that and say that, I'm just reminded of when Jesus was in Nazareth and he didn't perform any miracles because they just kind of blew him off. It's like, this is a carpenter's son. And this is just Jesus. This is just Joe. My buddy Jeff Walling calls it Nazaritis. Yeah. And it's when we become so familiar, and so God just becomes ordinary to us. I sat in church last week, and I watched on just a normal weekend at one service, I watched 16 people be baptized. Tears everywhere, hugs everywhere. And if I'm not careful, that just becomes routine to me.
Absolutely.
Because I'm sitting there worshiping. I'm just, we had 15 baptisms last week, so we had 12 baptisms. And it loses something. And there's something really powerful when we come face to face with the power of God and realize this is fresh, this is new, this is a brand new in this person's life that just encountered Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. It was Chaucer that says familiarity breeds contempt. And I think in many ways, if we could take that to another level, familiarity also breeds boredom.
Yeah.
That's sort of the tragedy in every relationship. When I meet with a group of young guys and they're all dating, they're all in brand new dating relationships, and you can tell, they're checking their phones every 5 seconds. And I asked them, do you think that sort of butterflies in the stomach is going to last you for 30, 40, 50 years. And they just don't know any better yet. They're just living in that kind of honeymoon phase. And so many of us have that, which is why we need to constantly be reminded of the stories of God, of the testimonies of faith, of what is God doing. Faith gives us language for what God is doing, but it also increases our capacity to believe that God is still doing miraculous work around the world. And in many ways, I think it's more difficult to be a Christian in the West than in the East. Persecution is happening all over the East. But in the West, it is so easy to just depend on yourself. I mean, why do you really need God? You have great biblical software that can write your sermons. You have your air condition. You have the best worship teams money can buy. You have great staff. You have a great building. You have great marketing. You have great branding. Why would you need God? Like, why would you need God at all? Because I can go to church once a month, and then I can go do everything else I want to do, and I can still claim that I'm a Christian, but there's nothing to actually test. There's nothing to actually test whether there's any fruit being born in my life. Whereas in places in the East, the fastest growing church in the world is in Iran. The fastest growing church in the world. If we want to see Iran change, it won't be because of a political strategy or a military strategy. We have to be praying that God raises up a Paul inside of that community. And from the inside out, the gospel from the inside out transforms that nation. And the regime change is a regime of the gospel, where now that country is being naturalized in the gospel, not nationalized in the gospel. And I love a particular story. Dr. E. Stanley Jones, who is one of my heroes that I never met, but my father wrote his dissertation on him.
Really?
He's having this meeting with Mahatma Gandhi. And he asked Mahatma Gandhi, how can Christianity be naturalized in India? Not nationalized. How can it be naturalized? How can people see this way of living and be so attracted to it? And this is Mahatma Gandhi. He gives them 4 things. And one of them is just live the way of Jesus without adulterating it. This is a Hindu national leader aiming for independence against the British. And he's saying, if you want Christianity to take off in India, just live the way of Jesus. Just live like Jesus. And be different. Be different than the culture. Be congruent to the Bible that you say you believe. And I think it's hard to do in America. I really do.
What's the purpose of the church if we live no different than the world?
Yep.
I'm reminded as you're talking, I'm soaking all this up because I'm thinking of some of my international experiences and comparing that with living in the Bible Belt. And it's not always a good thing to live in the Bible Belt. We've become so comfortable in our Christianity. I was in Kenya one time, and on my ride to the airport 5 days later with my translator, who had helped us in some different places where we had been. His name was James. And I said, okay, be honest. You see a lot of Americans come over here. I said, what do you think of American Christianity? And he said, well, to be honest, you all are not desperate.
And that's it. That's 100% it. We're not desperate. And there's so many revivals happening, or these sort of renewals, outpourings, revivals. And in many ways, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I was sitting at a round table a few months ago with a group of people talking about the revival amongst Gen Z and college campuses and things like that. And so one young man who's doing work on a college campus in the South, in the SEC.
Yeah.
And he's saying, we do
know the schools well. Yeah.
He's like, we do these amazing prayer and worship nights, and we'll have thousands of students show up. And it's on, I forgot what night he said, Tuesday nights, Wednesday night, Thursday, something like that. And I'm listening, and I asked him, hey, what would happen if you scheduled that worship and prayer at the same time on a Saturday at 10 a.m. when that school is playing Alabama? And he said nobody would show up. And I told him, I'm just not interested in any revival that doesn't cost you anything. Because we're not willing to tear down the high places. What did the king
tear down the idols? Yeah.
What did the kings in the Old Testament get in trouble for? They were starting some revivals, but they never tore down the high places. You refused to tear down the high places. And I remember moving to Chicago, fresh off the boat, as you will say, fresh off the boat. And one of my dad's friends, he says, do you want to see the biggest church in Chicago, in Illinois? And I'm thinking, yeah, let's go see. Because my dad was pastoring a large church, beautiful Methodist church in India, and it was large. And I said, I would love to see the biggest church in Chicago. And so he drives us to Lakeshore Avenue, and he pulls up to Soldier Field. He said, this is the biggest church in the city.
Yeah.
Every week for 8 weeks in a row, this place is packed with 60, 70, 80,000 worshipers who tithe good money to get in. and they sacrifice to the idols and they watch their gods battle. And all the other ones who can't afford to come to the temple, they buy other temples and they can watch. And if you go to most American homes, what is the center of the living room? The center is the TV.
Screen.
Everything's looking at the TV. Everything's looking at the TV, which now the device is in your hand. And that's a incredible thing. And I remember asking my dad one time, because when you go to India, you go to China, you go to Southeast Asia, you go to Africa, you see temples everywhere. You see temples, you see priests everywhere. You see the idolatry everywhere. And I remember one time somebody asked my father, I was next to him as a kid, and he asked them, how come you don't see idols like this in America? And he said, because our idols are monetized. Our idols are commercialized. We spend good money for idols, but we don't consider them idols. We don't consider them idols, but we worship them, we pay for them. Now, I'm not saying you can't enjoy a football game. I'm not saying you can't enjoy watching a movie, but there's a difference between watching those things and orienting your life around those things. I know grown men that have the entire roster of football teams memorized, Christian men, but they couldn't name the 12 disciples. They couldn't tell you things about the Bible, but they have dedicated their lives to those things, and they're discipling their children in that. You know, I live in Denver, and a few years ago, I'm driving on 25, and there's a massive billboard with a poster of the Avalanche, and it says, "Raise them right," and it's a father with his children. Raise them right. That's a discipleship board. Raise them right. Raise them right. We can't get students. When I was in youth ministry, we couldn't get students to come 1 day a week, 2 days a week, to come for Bible study, for discipleship, because those same kids were being taken to 2-a-days, multiple days in the gym, multiple theater practices, multiple academic pursuits. And again, none of those things are wrong. None of those things are wrong. But when they become idols, or what Tim Keller would call counterfeit gods, we orient our lives around, this is not the way of Jesus. This is not the way we are to be followers of Jesus in our world today.
So you have people right now who are listening to you, and they're squirming. I'm squirming. Because you're not pulling any punches. And whenever you start to talk about sacred cows that our culture has said, there's a part that would want to say to you, and I'm not saying I would want to say this to you, but hey, you just don't understand our culture.
Totally.
You're not from here. You're from India. You're from Singapore. You just have to understand we do things differently here. And if you only knew the Christian sports testimonies from these people who have a really large platform. There's great things that are happening. There's Fellowship of Christian Athletes. There's all of these things. And we immediately go to those things. But I think it was Vance Havner said, the problem is the situation is desperate and we are not.
Yeah.
I see in America, I see this all the time where I feel like we begin to cater and we make it so easy for a person to come to church. Do you see that? Is that something or...
Yeah, absolutely. On the one hand, I think you should remove obstacles. You don't want to put nails in the parking lot as people are driving to church. But at the same time, being a part of the gathering of God's people has got to be a sacrifice that you are willing to make for the good of your own formation and that of your family. So, for example, every Wednesday as a church, we gather for prayer. And it's worship and prayer. And there's no preaching. It's just prayer, testimonies, praying with each other, praying for the city. And I remember one time somebody asked me, hey, if we want to make this easier for family, more accessible for families with children, should we offer childcare? So that way they can show up. And I looked at this person, I said, I've been to several Nuggets games, Broncos games, Rockies games, Taylor Swift concerts. Last time I checked, the Broncos don't offer childcare. The Nuggets don't offer childcare. The Grammys don't offer childcare. Taylor Swift isn't offering childcare. And families are willing to make that sacrifice. Why can't they make this sacrifice? And you've got to be able to willing to make the sacrifice and even bring your children. My kids go with us. My wife and I drag our 4 kids. And is it romantic? Absolutely not. It's difficult to be in a posture of prayer with your kids, but we want our children to see this is who we are, not just what we do, that we are a family and a people that pray. And that's what we want to do. And I'm telling you, you can tell the strength of a church by 2 things. It's love for the poor, how they treat the poor, and their love for prayer. Do they gather to pray? And I'll never forget a book that changed my life, page 22, Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire, Jim Cymbala, he wrote, I despaired at the thought that my life would slip by without ever seeing God show himself mightily on my behalf. And I want to be a part of a church and a generation of men and women and followers of Jesus that long to be desperate for God in prayer and raise up our children to be in that. And to say, this is a sacrifice. Come follow me means pick up your cross, come follow me, surrender and sacrifice for what it means to follow Jesus. And so I want to be a part of that. And I don't want to just make it easy for people. I don't want to make it hard on purpose.
No.
But we want to say, hey, listen, you're willing to make sacrifices everywhere else.
Christian leaders, take that last 2 minutes and play it at your next all-staff meeting. I mean, it just hit me between the eyes, and maybe it hit you. You've got a church, LifeGate. You founded that church. Just from hearing you talk, it's got to be different than so many other churches. It sounds to me like it must be distinctive because of what they're hearing you preach. And I think, I'll try not to get emotional on this, but I think you're setting the bar really high. And I mean that is the highest compliment that I can give you. Because I think what we've done in America is within our churches, we have set the bar so low.
Yeah.
I used to say it with youth ministry, hey, you come, we'll have the video game set up for you. We've got ping pong over here. We'll have popcorn. We'll have pizza. If we have time, we'll slide in a 15-minute lesson, but, we'll see how the time goes. And then we brag and boast about how many people we got there, but what did we bring them to?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And what exactly are we baptizing them into? Mm-hmm. What exactly are we discipling them into? Because whatever you win someone with is what you have to keep them with. And I've been with my wife for 18 years, and I was flat broke when I was so broke I had to save up to be poor. Flat broke. And so I couldn't take her on these wild, expensive dates and in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, listen, we're gonna go to this place, because whatever you win someone with is what you keep them with. And I'm nervous and afraid that for a long time, the church in America is still operating out of the church growth movement from the 1980s. And we're still trying to win people over with something other than the radical message of Jesus. And what is that message of Jesus? Come follow me, which simply means walk with me. Walk with me, to orient your life around me. I love what Ignatius of Antioch would say, that to walk with God is to live in harmony with him. What Philo of Alexandria would say, the Jewish Hellenistic philosopher, that to walk with God is the highest form of humanity. So when Jesus says, walk with me, follow me, he's saying orient your life around me. I think the three greatest words in Scripture, the most powerful words in Scripture, are when Jesus says in John 15, abide in me. The implication is you're abiding in all kinds of things, looking for comfort, strength, success, glory, power, provision, belonging, name it, but abide in me. So the implication is you're already abiding in someone or something. And the way in which you abide in me is to surrender to me. And we live right now, what I'm trying to teach our church.
Oh, that's good.
What I'm trying to teach our church, and our church is unbelievable. If you're ever in Denver, come visit. We have, whenever someone says the church in America is dying, young people are leaving, come to our church. You will see people, young people, on fire for the Lord.
Tell me about your church.
Hunger for the Lord.
Give me an elevator pitch. We're on an elevator. Pitch. We're going to 20 floors up. Oh, you're a pastor. Which church? LifeGate.
LifeGate Church in Denver, Colorado, in the city, next to a strip club and across the street from a golf club. Depending on who I'm talking to, I bring up that club to see which one they know about, and that'll tell me a lot about them. It's young. It's 10 years old. It's young, vibrant, inter-ethnic, intercultural, intergenerational, on fire for the Lord, a deep hunger for God's word, a deep hunger for prayer, a deep hunger for the presence of God, encountering God, radically hospitable people, generous, aiming to live a communal life in holiness and the pursuit of God, living out justice in the world for the sake and the cause of Christ in the world. And so that's who our church is, and they're on fire for the Lord.
I'm going to stop you right there. Because everybody listening, your heart beats faster when you hear a person say that. Because I want to be a part of a church like that. I feel like I'm a part of a church like that, but that's exciting.
It is.
That's New Testament Christianity. That's first century stuff.
Yep.
You were very intentional. You said, not to take away whatever you were getting ready to say, I apologize for the interruption, but you were very intentional. I noticed you said intercultural.
Yeah. Yep.
More than multicultural.
Yep.
And I've noticed you've got a vocabulary. I've already picked up 5 words that I didn't know, and I'll have to look them up later because I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And I'm learning a lot just from listening to you talk. Why did you choose that word? Was it a rhyme or reason to that?
I do. I think semantics, I think language matters, the way we talk about something. And so someone might argue that multi-ethnic and inter-ethnic are just semantics, and it's just describing things differently. My wife is Caucasian, which means white for the audience listening. And so our marriage is interracial.
I do know what that word means. Okay.
Our marriage is interracial. It's interethnic. Our kids are interracial, which by 2050, all statistics are pointing to that the 50% of marriages or more in America will be interracial. And so what we want to do is not to say, see, what I think a lot of churches do when they look at multi is they say, how do we assimilate people into the church? And they'll say, we're still going to do our programs, we're still going to do our ministry, we're still going to do all of our fill in the blank in the majority population way, but we'll assimilate other minorities into the church. Well, I'm not interested in assimilating. I'm interested in integrating people into the life of the church, which means our church is going to look different in many ways. Our worship is multi-ethnic, interethnic. We do different languages. For example, when we do communion, one of the ways we do communion is intinction. And so people come up and they take the bread and they dip it into the cup, and we do different ethnicity breads. It's a small reminder for our church that the kingdom is multi-ethnic. The kingdom is interethnic. The kingdom is global. When we are in the presence of God in the new heavens, the new earth, we're going to look around and there's no nations, there's no borders. We are all one new humanity in Christ, and we want to honor that humanity. We want to celebrate that uniqueness that we all bring. And so it's one way for us to do that. And it's not easy. Anything is not easy. My wife would tell you this. My wife would tell you that her life would be a lot easier if she married a white guy from San Antonio in the same economic status who grew up the same way and talked the same way as her. My life would be easier if I was married to a Tamil South Indian who grew up in the same way and who could cook my favorite food. My wife can't cook lemon rice, chicken curry, and naan. She can't do that. So our life would be a lot easier. The way we communicate would be easier. It's so hard for me to communicate to my wife sometimes because I'm thinking in Tamil. And that doesn't necessarily translate to English. And if I would say the exact translation, I wouldn't be married very long. I probably wouldn't be alive very long. And so all of that's difficult. I have to reframe the way my language works with her. Eastern culture that I grew up in, that's an honor-shame culture. My wife grew up in a freedom and autonomy culture. And we're both trying to be married with Christ in the middle, and God is reforming all of this in us. Now take that and multiply it by thousands. We have 54 nations represented.
At LifeGate?
At LifeGate. So we have multiple languages. So just put all that in, and while that's a big mess, every one of the uniqueness of those people and their experience actually enhances the flavor of what God is building in our church. It's not easy. If you want to do an anything, it's not easy. It's not easy. Don't do it because it's cool.
But would you say it's worth it?
It's worth it, because the conviction I have and the conviction we have is that the gospel is not simply reconciling us to God. It's not just the good news of justification. We are reconciled to God, certainly, but we're also reconciled to one another. And that is the picture I think the American church often misses, that we are reconciled to one another. God creating a new humanity of Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Latino, Canadian, all of it together, reflecting God's image and reflecting God's beauty to the world. And think about the New Testament church. The New Testament church is the first time in history you could walk into a room and see people of different ethnicities and languages. Think of the church in Philippi. Have you ever thought about that? Their converts is Paul, a former Jew who's now a Christian, Lydia, an Asian woman who's a fashion designer, a Greek slave girl, and a Roman GI. What language are they speaking? What food are they eating? What's the order of service that they're doing? And this is the picture. And we often read the Bible as if everything was easy in the context and everything just made sense to them right away. And we have to see the beauty of what God is creating in his multi-ethnic, interethnic family. And so I use the word inter because I want us to see that we are connected to one another, we're integrated into life with one another, and we're aiming to live a communal life in real time in the real world.
Wow. What have you experienced as far as leadership challenges in actually having to build or wanting to build a culturally diverse church? What's some of the leadership challenges? Because I'm certain that's not easy because it's so unique.
Definitely not easy. So, I mean, on a general basic level, I think one of the things that we have to be cautious about, that the Bible warns us about, Paul warns us about, is just don't put people in positions of leadership too soon. You really want to be able to, and that was one of the critical mistakes I made early on, is ascending people into leadership before they were ready, before there was an assessment of their character, or whether they really understood the vision and mission of what we're after. Because
don't you think that's a common problem with church plants? Because
very common problem.
You're dying to get some leadership in there, and you're like, oh, I see something in this person. They'd make a great leader.
Yes.
I think that probably happens all the time.
All the time. And the one thing you want to slow down and try to pray through, and in conversations and in scenarios, get an assessment of somebody's motivation. Why do they want to be a leader? And you really want to make sure that people understand the formation of your church, the philosophy of the church, the direction of the church, the vision and mission, because you can have someone who's incredible, high character, someone who has given you no reason to question them in their walk with Jesus. But if they don't understand what you're going after, it can bring up a lot of contention, a lot of confrontation, simply because they don't understand. And you lack the patience or the language to explain it to them. They don't, because when you're a church plant, here's what happens in your church plant, or just a church, and you're a growing church, people start coming to your church and they'll say, well, Pastor, we love coming here, but our old church used to do this.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't understand why you guys do that, but we do this. And
they bring their baggage with them. And
they bring their baggage, they bring their expectations. And so you say, well, why don't you just go back then? Just go back. And when you're small, you're so desperate to be liked by everybody.
Yeah.
You're willing to do anything. You're willing to do anything and everything. So early on, you have to have, this is who we are, this is who we are not.
Oh,
this is what we do, this is what we don't do. So for example, at our church, we begin with a corporate call to worship. We all say the same prayer. We do a call and response. We do Black gospel songs. We do songs in different languages, which this has happened to me on several occasions. We'll do a song in Spanish or Malayalam or Telugu or something, and somebody will come up to me and they'll say, why do we have to sing a song in Spanish? Most people here don't even speak Spanish, which many do. And I'll have to help them see, why is it difficult for you for 2 minutes not to be the priority? For 2 minutes, you're not the priority. For 123 minutes, we're speaking in a language you know. For 2 minutes, you can't put up with it. And so you have to be really firm on, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why we do it. You should be able to defend and cast vision of why you do something, because everybody will have a complaint. Everyone.
You're right.
And you want to teach your staff and teach your leaders and teach your team how to not meet people at the level of their complaint, but raise them to the standard of the vision. Bring them up to the vision. This is why we're doing this. And so on a leadership level, help people understand the vision of what you're doing. Secondly, this is more difficult. As a leader, most leaders don't have an awareness of the culture they were raised in, the theological culture, the ethnic culture, the ideological culture, the denominational culture. So have an understanding of the culture you were raised up in. So many times our confrontation is not about personality. It's not about character. It's just two different cultures trying to talk to each other. There's a wonderful book called The Culture Map that unpacks this. So for example, African culture is built, on the most part, tribal culture is built on power and the need to control, which often then manifests itself because every culture will bear fruit, as Jesus would say in John 15:7-8. It bears fruit. It bears the fruit of fear. Eastern culture is built on honor. And the result of that culture is shame, which is why, the National Alliance for Mental Health would suggest that the leading cause of death in young Asians aged 20 to 24 is suicide because of shame, because everything is about your role and responsibility to the family and the community and the way it makes the family look. American culture is built on autonomy, and the fruit of that culture is loneliness and anxiety, which is why we are living in what Vivek Murthy, then Surgeon General, said, a loneliness epidemic.
Yes.
Okay, so let's take three different ways of seeing something and putting them in a conversation. So let's take this in a leadership meeting. Typical American leadership meeting, Western style meeting. Hey, pastors, anybody have any ideas of what we could do to make our outreach event better? All right, everyone go. And everyone just sort of chimes in their opinion because they're American and you have the right to say whatever you want. You have the autonomy, you have the freedom.
No bad ideas.
And who's sitting in the corner? Your Southeast Asian, your Korean, your Malaysian, your Indonesian, your Indian staff person who says nothing. And you start to think to yourself, oh my gosh, this person's entitled. This person has no good ideas. Why is this person on our staff? They won't engage. They're not a team player. But what they don't know is that in Asian culture, it's honor and shame. And the Asian person who has not been exposed to American culture for a long time will not answer a question unless they're actually asked. Can you tell me your idea? Because in Asian culture, that would never happen.
Really?
A CEO would never walk into a boardroom and say, what ideas do you all have? You only speak when you're spoken to. You only respond with whatever you're asked when you are asked. It's not like American culture. So now when someone says, hey, no, this person is a team player. This person, it wants to be a part of the team. They just come from a different culture. So as a leader, you have to
give
learn.
Them permission to share that idea.
And you have to create the space to understand and learn all these different things. And so I have conversations all the time with people on our staff, with people, and then there's generational. It's not just ethnic, it's generational. I'm a millennial who raised in India and then raised up in the Midwest. And that the Midwest, work hard, till the ground, make a name for yourself. I mean, that is embedded into my soul.
Yeah.
But if you grew up in California with the sort of, man, carefree, take life as it comes. So there's cultural, there's generational. Millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, they all operate differently. We come from different cultural understandings of how we all see the world. So it's very easy to say, oh, all Gen Zs are lazy. They're all just lazy. Well, they grew up in a totally different context. And we have to learn how to speak their language and meet with them and raise the bar and bring them up. I was watching Band of Brothers the other day, and I was thinking to myself, can you imagine if there was a draft today? Like those men in Band of Brothers, World War II men, they were built different.
Yeah.
They were built with a sense of duty. So the culture that was around during the boomers were asking, what is the right thing to do? What is the duty that I need to do? Millennials are not asking that. Gen Z is not asking that question. Every generation is asking a different question.
What do you think they're asking?
Gen Z?
Yeah.
I think Gen Z is asking, what is the beautiful thing? What is the beautiful life? How do I have a beautiful life? And that manifests in I want to be happy, it's my body, it's my choice, it's my truth, but all that is saying I want to live a beautiful life.
Very interesting. You said earlier, when we were talking about planting the church and people come in with their expectations.
Their expectations, yep.
And you said, that's not who we're going after. That's not what we're going after. It takes a lot of guts and courage to say when you're in a church planning situation, oh, this might not be the best place for you.
Absolutely.
Because you're looking for those warm bodies and hopefully some people that might actually put some money in the offering as well. So
it's very real. It's very real.
Tell me what it is that you are looking for, because you said, what you go after, that's what you're going to get, and that's how you're going to keep them as well. So who are you going after? Who were you going after?
Right.
Tell me what that looks like.
Someone asked me today, I was on a phone call, someone asked me, why do most marriages fail, even in the church? And I told them you have to begin with the beginning. Most people don't even know what the point of marriage is. Their idea of marriage is from the context of the culture. It's not from the scriptures of what is the purpose of this marriage. I think most churches, before you can lead a church or go to a church, you have to have an understanding of what is the church. You have to have a strong conviction of what is this for. And I would argue firmly that the church in any culture is not meant institutionally and as the gathering of God's people to reach lost people, to be aware, to be seeker. We're here, when people say we're a church for the unchurched, that makes no sense whatsoever. It makes absolutely no sense. Or when people say our church will do anything shy of sin to reach people, that makes no sense, because you can be foolish. And just because it's not sinful doesn't mean it's not foolish. And that makes no sense. You have to have a deep conviction. There's no pastor in Iran or Orissa or North Korea that's saying, hey guys, we're a church for the unchurched. Bring your friends. Invite your friend. Bring your unchurched friends here. And on the way, if they get beheaded, well, so be it. They know what the purpose of the church is. The ecclesia is creating the space for God to work and for God to be exalted, to open the scriptures, to invite people to understand who we are in light of who God is. Now, we should certainly be aware that there's some unbelievers in our midst. Paul says in Corinthians, be aware of the unbeliever. But he doesn't say cater it to the unbeliever, orient it around the unbeliever. Never says that. Never says that. We in America have taken the church and made the church. We've made Sunday morning the evangelistic arm of the church. And now, again, hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying you should not invite your friends to church. I'm not saying that. Because fortunately, we live in a country, we live in an environment, we are still able to bring our friends to church. We're able to do that. But don't make it the pastor's responsibility to disciple them. Don't make it the kids' pastor's responsibility to disciple your kids. You take the ownership to invite people to share your faith and to raise them up in the Lord and disciple them and hopefully see them baptized one day. And then you continue to disciple them. So you have to have a conviction of what the church is. What is the ecclesia? What is the gathering of God's people? Why is that? It is for the exaltation of Jesus, the edification of the saints, the encouragement of the body, to empower people to live on mission amongst one another and in the world, to be sent as agents as ambassadors of Christ, as Paul would say. And this is the embassy. Can you imagine the U.S. embassy in Iran or in India to say, we exist as an embassy for non-Americans? What are you talking about? You're an embassy in India for Americans and for those who want to be Americans or come to America. And there should certainly be an awareness of it. But I think we've got it backwards of what the church is in America. There will be a day, I don't know when, there will be a day where this nation is persecuted. And the days of let's focus on our branding and let's focus on
that's where the church is growing.
It won't work anymore. It won't work anymore. It's coming. And we shouldn't pray for it. We shouldn't pray for persecution. We should pray for a revival of the Spirit in our land and in our homes and in the city. We should ask God to meet us and move. But we want to, Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights, whenever your church meets, you're hosting God. God desires to dwell with his people. God, come and dwell with us, refine us, purify. So first you have to begin with an understanding of what is the church, who is the church, and then you can have a conviction of who are we trying to reach. And so we are aiming to reach lost people by way of empowering and discipling found people to be sent out into the world, into their places of work, into their schools, their institutions, their relationships, their neighborhoods, their friendships, and testify and witness to the resurrection power of Jesus in real time, and then see them come and join the family of God and be invited into that story. And one of my favorite stories is there's a young man named Caleb in our church. He's not on staff. He's a part of our church. Young man on fire for the Lord, growing in his business, incredible husband and father. He began to invite one of his friends to come to church. And he never once said, "Hey, pastor, can you make the sermon a little bit easier today because this is my unchurched friend? Can we do some songs that maybe he would relate to?" Never did that. He just brought him and took responsibility for the faith of this young man who was his friend and his wife who were not believers. And over the course of time, and I saw him come the first Sunday, he was sitting on the opposite side of me, and he's sort of, what is going on? People are raising their hands, they're clapping, they're reciting these prayers from who knows who wrote them. And I'm watching him just observe. And then week after week after week, I can see him engaging a little bit more. Day one, he has no Bible. A few months later, he has a Bible. And then he gets baptized the Sunday after Easter. And Caleb, no one on staff, baptized. His friend baptized him. And his friend is discipling him. And I saw the Sunday he got baptized, he goes back to his seat. And we end every gathering we do. We don't call it a worship experience. We don't call it a service. We call it a gathering. We meet in the sanctuary, not the worship center, because language matters. Language matters. So we always end our gathering with reciting the Gloria Patri, a 2nd century benediction that the church has been saying for years.
In case some of our listeners and the podcast hosts are unfamiliar with that, would you mind saying
Yes,
that right
2nd
now?
century benediction. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. And I'm watching across, and I see him, this young man who 6 months ago has no idea what this is. His hands are open, his hands are lifted up, eyes closed, and he's by heart reciting the Gloria Patri. And you know what's happening in that moment? Not only has he come to faith, not only is he now a follower of Jesus, not only is he now a part of this community of believers here locally on the ground, he is now folded himself by the power of the Holy Spirit into the unfolding story of God that's been moving for 2,000 years. he is now reciting prayers that have been prayed by the saints who have been marched into arenas, who've been killed, who've been standing strong. He's saying the same prayer as Jim Elliot, the same prayer as Graham Staines, men who gave up their life to follow the Lord. He's saying the same prayer as followers of Jesus who are black and white and Asian and Hispanic, who for centuries have followed God, and he is now in that story. He's now a part of that story. And what we're missing in the church in the West is inviting people into the story of God, because we've made the gospel a linear equation. We've made the church an organization of programs. Rather than saying from Genesis to Revelation, God has written a story and inviting us into that story that we might be conformed and transformed into the image of Christ. And that's what we're seeing. And so you have to have a deep conviction of what is the gospel, a deep conviction of what is worship, a deep conviction of what is discipleship, and then be unwilling, resilient, unwilling, steadfast to say, this is the way we're going about it. We're going to move in this way, and just be unwavering in that. And I'll tell you, it's not all the church planters listening right now, or if your church is small and you're struggling, first of all, praise God for your faithfulness.
Amen.
Praise God for your faithfulness. Keep going. Memorize, if you haven't done it already, memorize 1 Corinthians 15:58. Be steadfast and immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. So keep tilling the ground. Keep tilling.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's not in struggle or when you are small that you are most susceptible to compromise. It's when you are large and successful. I asked my staff this the other day. I'm like, what is the thing that keeps us away from innovation? What is the thing that keeps us away from reimagining? It's success. When you feel successful, the money's coming in. I mean, we started a church in a coffee shop with 45 people. We were flat broke. I failed every church plant assessment I took. They told me I can't lead, they told me I can't preach, and they told me I can't raise money. We've had our trailers stolen. They've taken everything. We've lost so much. When COVID hit, we lost so many people who were saying, if you don't stand up to the man and we keep meeting, we're leaving. And I told them we don't own a building, so I don't know what man you want me to tell. So God bless you.
It does complicate things. Yeah.
Complicates things. We've faced so many issues before, so many, but that's not what keeps you from innovating. Now we have a massive building. We're looking at buying the entire property and creating space for the community and nonprofits and a real ministry center. We're sending out missionaries. We have budgets in the millions. We have staff. We have so many good things going. We have a worship team that has a record label. I mean, all all these beautiful things, all these great things, and it sort of keeps them. Oh, we can't change anything.
It's going so well.
It's going so well.
Why change when it's
Don't shake
good?
it up. Don't shake it up. Keep it. We have to constantly be reimagining. Your conviction doesn't have to change, but your imagination should. Think about marriage. Think about marriage. The older you get in marriage, you know what no one tells you about? You know what no one ever told me when I first got married? Hey man, when you turn 40, your body's going to change. You're not going to be as energized anymore. The things you once thought you could do, you won't want to do anymore. My wife I remember this young man lived in our basement, and he was saying, he's now married, beautiful wife, and he asked me one time, he's like, how can you be married to the same woman for so many years? Isn't that boring? And I said, what are you talking about? She changes every 6 years.
Yeah.
I've been married to 3 women. Yeah. What are you talking about?
That's exactly right.
And so your conviction
change your hair color that often too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So your conviction of marriage can't change. Your conviction of God's design for family can't change, but you have got to be able to reimagine what it looks like today. And so many churches in America, across the world, let's just say across the world, we don't have a resource problem. We have an imagination problem. We're still employing the same programs, the same ministry techniques from the 1980s. And we're convincing people that it's biblical. We're convincing people, no, this is Acts 2. Without any context of Acts 2 is happening in a communal society. It is not America 2025. Now, do we need fellowship? Yes. Do we need community? Yes. But you've got to reimagine it for our world today. I could talk about this all day.
No. You're reminding me of is the fact that I read an article back when I was in my 50s. I actually retired and passed things off to my successor when I was 57, almost 58 years old. And it was partly because of this article that I read in my early 50s. And it said the larger an organization gets, And the longer a person is there, the less risks they take.
Absolutely.
Because the bigger that thing gets, you pull in. I think about the risks I took when I was 44 years old when I took over the lead. Okay, we're going to go multi-site. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I took really big risks. But once those started paying off, all of a sudden this place is getting larger and larger. Now I start pulling back. And safety and security, and I don't want to botch something really big and really good. And so my innovation, my imagination kind of goes by the wayside. This article talked about how the 40s are incredible leadership years. And I knew that Kyle Idleman, when I was 57, he was 44. Those were great years for him. And so part of my motivation 5 years before that ever happened was having a conversation with Kyle and saying, hey, I'm not telling anybody, but I think I'm going to pass things off to you then. And, because I knew he'd be ready then. But when you talk about when something's large, think about the problems that you had in church planning back in that first year or two. Totally different than what you have now.
Totally different.
And yet there's that tendency to want to pull back.
Yeah.
What
you have more to lose. You have more to lose now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think your 20s are all about, it's the decade of your theories. I have theories, and I'm going to test these theories out.
I'm going to try this out. Yeah.
And then your 30s are the year of your experiments. I think I'm going to experiment on a couple different things. Your 40s are the year of your expertise. I now know one of the greatest gifts of turning 40 is you can now say, I'm not good at that. That's not who I am. I don't do that. And I'm going to double down on what I'm good at. I think one of the greatest gifts that happened to me when I think we're 2 months into the church plant, and I had this painful realization that I'm not John Maxwell. I'm not Andy Stanley. I'm not Craig Groeschel. I'm not Bill Hybels. I'm not a strategic leader. I want to preach the Bible. I want to reach lost people. That's what I want. I want to focus on culture. I want to speak into the culture. I want to be a thought leader. And so now in my 40s, I'm 40 now. Like I'm not going to work on my weakness. I'm not talking character weakness.
I know what you mean.
Competency. I'm not good at that. And I'm at a season now where I don't need to be good at that because our staff is larger and there are other people who can do that because that's their competency. And so as a leader, I need to create space for them to do what they're best at so I can do what I'm best at. In your 40s, that's the best time. And in your 50s, I'm not 50s yet, but I think it's exactly what you're saying. In your 50s, you're beginning to look downwards and saying, how do I cultivate the environment for someone else to come in and take this? But I absolutely agree with you. Mm-hmm. The larger you get, the more you have to lose. And so you're willing to take less risks. And so you've got to be able to reimagine, imagine, and discernment. Hopefully what goes up in your 40s and 50s is discernment. The willingness to ask the question, just because we can, the great question from Jurassic Park, just because we could doesn't mean we should. Yeah. Should we do these things? It's really have to ask, hey, we could do this, but should we? Should we do those things? Should we expand? Should we go to multi-site? Should we scale back? Should we grow? So I think you have to ask those questions and be really, really slow, really slow. I think you can have a high level of dependence and a high level of urgency without having foolish timing. I think you can have both. I don't think they're competing with each other as much as we think they are.
Imagination with discernment.
Yeah, you have to be able to. You have to.
Man, as I listen to you, I mean it. You've stretched me in so many different ways, and I know we have people listening right now. They might be sitting in a car, they might be working out, wherever they are listening to this. You've caused us to actually think about some idols in our life, some things that maybe we've put the wrong emphasis on in our church leadership. I promise you that there's a student pastor right now who is listening to this and saying, oh, what is it that I'm winning them to? What is it that I am holding up as an expectation that might not be biblical? So thank you for challenging. Thank you for coming in and pushing our buttons and saying some things that might be tough for some of us to hear. Do you ever write? Is that something that you toy with? Or
I have a deep passion for writing, but not necessarily a deep discipline for it. As in, I've never really written before. I've written one book on worship leading that I released myself years ago. But speaking of that, you must be prophetic because I just signed to write a book with a real publisher. So now hopefully more than just my mom will buy the book. But it's on a topic that I'm
I've read
very...
some books like that.
I know she'll buy at least one, maybe two. But the name of the book is called Defiant Lights. And it's really built around the idea where Jesus says, I'm the light of the world, but then he looks at his followers and says, now you're the light of the world. And so I'm asking the question, what does that mean? What does it mean for us to live as the light of the world, to reflect the radiant beauty and power and truth of God in the world, and that so as we live, that God would get the glory and people would see our lives and would glorify God in heaven. So it's really all
I'll
about
buy
that.
that book. Well, you come back. We'll talk about the book the next time. But in the meantime, I just want people who are listening, if you are ever in the Denver area, check out LifeGate and go to the website at LifeGate. Can they hear your sermons there?
Yeah, lifegatedenver.com. On YouTube, search up LifeGate Denver. On Instagram, LifeGate Denver. So everything LifeGate Denver.
Awesome. Love you, bro.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun. It was fun.
Great. Wow. I hope you fastened your seatbelt because that was not for the faint of heart. And I love to be challenged by someone. And in a sense, I feel like we just got a spiritual spanking, and it caused us to really take a look at, okay, does this fit me? Is this an apt description of me? Am I really fulfilling the mission that I have as a Christian leader and building the church that Christ wants us to? I love so many different parts of Nirup's interview. I loved him talking about revival that doesn't cost anything isn't revival, and how he talked about how you can't orient your life around sports or around whatever it might be and expect your kids to follow Jesus. Those are things that we have to really wrestle with. And yes, these things are good things, as he continued to point out, but are they the best thing? And I love the fact that he doesn't back away from that. How about the phrase, whatever you win someone with is what you keep them with? So we have to really question and take a look at, all right, what are the things that we're using to attract people? And are those godly things, or are they things that bring them closer to Christ? And then toward the end, he talked about your conviction doesn't have to change, but your imagination should. I don't think we talk enough about imagination. And what he got me doing was he actually got me dreaming and thinking about how it is that rather than seeing the church for where it is right now, what if we were to really unleash our wildest imagination for what it is that God could do and how it is that God could use us? You know, that passage in Ephesians chapter 3, 20 and 21, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. Our story for today comes from Walt Disney. Years ago, he created Disneyland out in California, and everyone went gaga over it. They said, this place is unbelievable. And at the dedication service for that, everyone kept saying, man, Walt, there'll never be another place like this. And everybody went crazy over it except for one person, and that was Walt Disney. And after all the fanfare subsided, he went down to Florida, and he began looking for a place where he could really unleash his wildest dreams and let his imagination run wild. And so, sure enough, he started going around with a realtor looking for places where he could buy property. And he drove around with this realtor for weeks until finally he found a place. And he said to the realtor, as they were driving along some swampland, he said, you know what? I think this is where I'd like to build Disney World. And the realtor laughed at him and said, you got to be kidding me. He said, Walt, all this is swampland. He said, no. He said, I see some possibilities here. He said, this is what I want. This is what I'll get. I'll buy it. And he bought it. Swampland was quite inexpensive, as you can imagine. If you've ever been to Disney World, you know what you do. You ride on a train and you go all around over the top of the swampland, and then you end up right there in front of the Magic Kingdom. And that's the way that Walt designed it. So he got all this property for dirt cheap because it was swampland, and then he made it a journey to get there. And then all of a sudden, that's where he put all of his rides. That's where he put the Magic Kingdom. At the dedication of Disney World, it was quite an event. partly because of the fact that it was so much greater than any other theme park that had ever been created, but also because of the fact that Walt Disney had passed away. At the dedication service, Walt Disney's widow was seated in the front row, and in the row behind were Walt's closest friends. And before the service started, one of Walt's friends put his hand on Mrs. Disney's shoulder and said, "I wish Walt could have seen this." And she looked back and said, "He did. And if he had not seen it, then we wouldn't be seeing it here today." What she was saying was, in his imagination, he saw what this theme park could be. He saw it in his mind, and that's how it came to fruition. What if we were to approach the church, and as we look at the vision for our churches where it is that we're serving, we began to see what it is that God might want to do, and we just began to dream and let our imaginations run wild so that it could be the church that Christ wants it to be, and it could be a church that does immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. Well, Christian leaders, I want to tell you something about something special the Focus on the Family has coming for you and your spouse. It's our Pastors Couples Conference, and it's designed to be 3 days of rest, encouragement, and great biblical teaching. This year's theme, The Joys of Serving Together, celebrates the unique calling and shared joys of serving in ministry together. Through practical sessions, meaningful conversations, and biblical insight, couples will be equipped to lead with unity, to guard their marriage, and find renewed joy in the mission that they share. And guess what? We're going to be doing a taping of Pastor to Pastor live at the conference. So bring your spouse, come join me. I can't wait to hear. They've got a lot of great speakers lined up. It's October 20th through the 22nd. To register, you can click the link below in our show notes. You can head over to thefocusedpastor.org. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this journey. Every Tuesday, we drop a brand new conversation on Pastor to Pastor. It's designed to encourage, inspire, and to challenge you. Because we know that leadership can be lonely. And we call this Pastor to Pastor for a reason. It's to remind you, you're not alone. So until next time, I'm Dave Stone, saying God bless.